Grand dawning, great rising, Cleveland, Ohio, and the rest of planet Earth. Welcome to another edition of 360 Info Network. I'm Vince Robinson. Our co host, Antonio, is out of town today. He may be joining us, and we are also waiting the arrival of our guests today. We are scheduled to have Yvonka Hall, who is the executive director of the Northeast Ohio Black Health Coalition. We have Nia Cleopatra. She is an advocate for wellness and beauty. And we also have Queen Mother ElAnee Barclay Jones, who is connected with Family First Child Care Center and Empowerment Center. Uh, Again, they're scheduled to join us sometime during this broadcast. Just want to put out a few things. First of all, I'd like to say that last weekend's event at Wings Academy was a phenomenal program. Professor Manu Ampim came in and he gave us an enlightening presentation about the history of African civilization. And I mean, this brother went way, way, way back. So if there was any confusion in someone's mind about the origin of African people and their impact on the planet, he definitely delivered that. He also gave us a lot of information about the ways in which the museums around the world and different places, specifically in the continent of Africa, in the country of Egypt, how they are changing our ancient folk to give them a European aesthetic. He was very deliberate and very meticulous in taking apart some of the myths that have been perpetuated by the restoration of some of those things that are over there for us to see, to remind us of our glorious history. Magnificent program, and I would highly encourage folk, if you can, to if you got children in the Cleveland Municipal School District and you think they might be eligible to attend this fine school, you might want to consider having them enroll there. It delivers an Afrocentric education. It was brought to us by Nana Kra Kwamina II, also known to you as Quad David Whitaker, known to some as Dr. Quad David Whitaker. Brother Whitaker has degrees in psychology and law, and he is not a hands-off type person. He's there. He's actually teaching classes. I'm sure that the grades go between, believe, first grade and up to seventh or eighth grade. So there's plenty there for young people, and the beauty of it is that they get an education that delivers an understanding of who they are. When you know who you are, you can be connected to your purpose in life. And that's one thing that we must all do, because in doing that, we are able to live out the true meaning of Ubuntu. And that simply refers to the fact that we exist for the benefit of others. We all are here on the planet to make the lives of each other's better. So, giving a child an understanding of who they are and what they are will give them an edge in life. It will give them an advantage in life. And most of all, it will enable them to serve their community. So, that's it for Wings Academy. Also, as we wait for our guests to arrive, and one of them had just checked in a few moments ago, I want to remind folks about the Transformative Art Fund. You know, it's been a really interesting experience serving in this capacity. Within the next, I say that today is the 23rd, I believe, we will be receiving proposals that have been submitted. We've received quite a few proposals. Some of them will make it to the next round, some of them won't. But those of you who have not applied yet, I just want you to know that you do have until March 30th at 11:59 p.m. To submit your proposals. And again, we look forward to receiving them. You know, this transformative art fund is it's groundbreaking. Cleveland has never seen anything like this before, and I know that there are a lot of folks out there that are talking about the application and some of the difficulties and challenges in it. But the thing about it is, the grants are going to range from between $250,000 and $500,000. So, because there are significant amounts of money involved in this, the city of Cleveland just wanted to make sure that the correct controls were in place to make sure that the accountability is there, make sure that the money gets spent appropriately. So again, I know that some of those things that they're asking you for on the application might seem to be a bit out there in terms of requirements, but they're necessary in order to allay the concerns of the city of Cleveland. And the city of Cleveland did a big thing when they moved $3 million from their own treasury or their own coffers to the Assembly for the Arts. The Assembly for the Arts is going to act as a fiscal agent, so to speak. And what they will be doing is they'll be passing out the funds to the institutional partners that are collaborating with the artists and the lead artists to bring these proposals to life. The hope is that these projects will be completed by sometime in August of 2025. So the rest of 2024 and much of 2025, folks will be working on their projects, bringing them to life. And the intention of this is to transform Cleveland neighborhoods. When we look at art, we're looking at all kinds of art. So we're not just looking at murals. A lot of people have gotten the misunderstanding that this is a public art program and the people who apply for this will be installing murals all over the city. Well, that's not the case. There are a lot of issues that affect Clevelanders. Some of them we will talk about in our broadcast today. And the sincere hope is that these projects can shine the light on those issues, but also play a role in resolving or at least ameliorating some of these issues that we're facing. We're talking about lead poisoning, we're talking about homelessness, we're talking about illiteracy, we're talking about things that affect us every day. We live in certain zip codes in this town. And because of living in those zip codes, our health is adversely affected. And the reality is that many of the industrial operations were in places that were in direct proximity to where we lived. So if there were chemicals and poisons that were used in those industries, they had an impact on the communities in the surrounding areas. And as a result of that, you can look at the life expectancy of someone that lives in 44124 or a zip code that might be Lyndhurst or Pepper Pike or a place like that. And then you look at a zip code like 44108, which is where I am. And you could see that just because a person is in this zip code, statistically, they have a shorter life. So these are some of the things that we really need to counteract. And it's really hope that the art projects that come forth will have a benefit and an impact on those issues. So much is going on in Cleveland. We just had primary elections, and it's interesting. I saw an interview on another podcast, and there was a brother that was in this podcast, and he was making a plea to those who were listening to go to the polls and to cast a vote for him. Well, the issue for him was that he was running as a Republican. And if you are a Republican and you get a ballot, it's not going to have your opposition, your Democratic opposition on it. And most of us in this town are registered as Democrats. So it was an uphill battle for him. I don't know what the outcome of the election was, but I know his heart is in the right place. We have been joined by Yvonka Hall. She is the executive director of the Northeast Ohio Black Health Coalition. And some of the things that I just mentioned in terms of the impact of environment and industry on folks who live in certain zip codes are things that she's very well familiar with. I'm really happy to have this conversation with her. It's long overdue. I told her the other day when I had the conversation about doing this program, I've seen her on social media, I've seen her on television news and so forth and so on, but we've never had a conversation. So again, I'm glad to have her on the show today. Welcome to 360 Info Network, Ms. Yvonka Hall. How are you today? If you can unmute your mic.
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Great. Now, I got to let folks know also that Yvonka Hall is one of the busiest people in our city. As we have this conversation, she is doing triple duty because she's got two events that she's connected to right now. But I really want to thank her for taking the time to have this conversation with me. So, again, I welcome you to 360 Info, and I look forward to what you will be providing for us today. So, you're the executive director of the Northeast Ohio Black Health Coalition. Tell us about that coalition before we take this conversation in another direction.
Sure. So first off, I have to let you know that I'm not in my office. So I am with you at Fifth Christian Church. I am utilizing their facility today to host a community engagement training with Acorn and Anthropocene Alliance, and also to do a community survey around kinship caregiving with Case Western Reserve University. And so please forgive me for not having my background as the Northeast Ohio Black Health Coalition that I normally have behind me. But the Northeast Ohio Black Health Coalition is the first coalition in the state of Ohio to focus exclusively on African American disparities. Our work, we were created to, our work is to create equity regarding the cumulative impact. So everything that goes on with our air, our land, and our water. Cumulative impact of racial, economic, environmental, and social justice inequities in the African American community on education, employment, housing, and health. And how do we do all of that? We do all of that through our work to educate, advocate for, and empower the community.
Okay. So, how long have you been connected with this organization? Is this something that you founded? Tell us, give us the history of it.
So, so in 2009, I was actually the director of the local Office of Minority Health, which I created. So I created the local Office of Minority Health, which is part of the health department, in 2008. And in 2009, I hosted this local conversation on health disparities. And so the whole purpose of the local conversation was to find out what were the unique needs of the different communities. And so one of the things that I did that was different than what other communities had done across the United States that were hosting these conversations was I divided people out into racial and ethnic groups, because I felt that a lot of times what happens is when they sit us all at a table together, because they created this whole thing around minority. And so minority means all of us. That what happens is the unique needs of our communities don't get met. And so I put people into their own groups for them to decide what they needed. And the Hispanic Latino group came out and said, they needed to create a Hispanic alliance. They wanted to do this whole thing around creating this Hispanic village on the west side. And as you see, that has come to fruition. They have really worked hard to create that. The Asian and Pacific Islander community got together and said, they wanted to make sure that healthcare was available in a culturally competent and proficient manner. And so they sought to host two healthcare systems. So now we have two. We have one in Akron. We have one in Cleveland. And the Native American community, Native American Pacific Islander community, said they wanted to do some things around these racial symbols in professional sports. And as we've seen a lot of movement with that. And so these things happened in 2009. But what bothered me the most is that the people who went into the room that said that their interests were for the African American community weren't necessarily us. And so we ended up with all these folks in the room saying, I want to talk about the interests of Black folks. But what they came out with was so deafening for me that I needed to start my own organization. So, they came out about this thing around African Americans needed to get over racism. And, this whole thing around this, creating things from the ground up. And, it was it was tone deaf to the needs of my community. And so I sat there and said, well, if you're supposed to be representing me at the table and this is how you feel about me, then maybe we need to have somebody who actually looks like me at the table. And so Shirley Chisholm says when they don't give you a seat at the table, you bring your own. And so for me, I made my own. So I created the Northeast Ohio Black Health Coalition on August the 1st, 2011. And right after that, probably less than a year later, I spoke out. I was still the director of the Office of Minority Health. I spoke out about the closing of Huron Hospital because I was absolutely pissed that we would lose a hospital system in the city of Cleveland that could actually had a trauma one center in it, which means that if people came in with bullets, stab wounds, severe injuries, that they had a way to be saved. But if you close out those systems, then how are people supposed to live? And then I lost my job for speaking out, and then I went to go do something else and spoke out about the policing issue in Cleveland and lost my job. And I said, okay, you know what? This is not for me. I think I need to take the Northeast Ohio Black Health Coalition to the next level. So if you wanted to know where we came out of our advocacy roots. We came out of those roots from looking at the needs of the African American community and saying, look, we have people who are siloed, who are speaking on our behalf, who have no idea about the cumulative impact that we're facing in our communities. And so for me, because I know what is going on in my community, I felt that I had the best voice to use to speak out.
Well, that's quite a bit there. But obviously, it was a situation where there was a need in the community, and you saw that something had to be done. So you took it upon yourself, and you created this great organization. And since you've been involved in this organization, you've been able to collaborate with quite a few other institutions and other partners. I'm going to be transparent and tell you that, and I'll tell the listening audience that I heard an interview that you did on another radio station, and I was just so impressed with your passion. It just seems that you're a person of action. There was something that happened to you early in life. If you'd like to give that background to us, and then we'll talk about some of the issues that we're facing right now.
Sure. So my mom was murdered in front of myself and my younger brothers when I was 6 years old. And I promised that I would use my life to help change the lives of others. And so that was in 1974. And I think I have lived her legacy well, making sure that I address domestic violence and the impact on families, particularly here in Cleveland. But for my work, doing my work throughout Northeast Ohio, my mom was 24 years old. She was a divorced mom of four. And I'm sure that, at the beginning of all this, she never thought that I would not live to see my children get old. And so for me, it has been a lifetime of making sure that I kept my promise to her, which is I would make sure that other families did not go through the things that we went through.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. Uh, Another thing that came up in your conversation was the fact that racism has been declared a public health crisis. But I think we came to the same conclusion about what has happened since that declaration was made. What are your thoughts about the fact that we have this awareness of racism as a public health crisis, but it doesn't seem that we're seeing any policy changes, any legislation, any programs to address it directly?
Well, part of the whole thing was we like to jump on board when things sound good, but sounding good and actually doing good are two different things. And so racism as a public health crisis for these declarations that have taken place all over the country, including here in Cleveland, which took place. Ours was in 2020, I believe, is when our declaration happened. Um, Having a declaration on paper is one thing, but having a declaration in practice is another thing. And we have yet to practice what we put on paper. And so, unless you actually have policies to back the thought process around what has gone on with racism, the United States was built on racism. So we have this structure that systemically every single thing that we stand upon is built on something that had a flaw in it. It did not look at us as a whole person or as a person at all. And so now we look at those same structures and expect those same structures to provide equity. Those structures were never meant to provide equity to our communities. And so our declarations of racism as a public health crisis should be looking at our educational systems, our employment systems, our housing systems, and our health and healthcare systems. We should be looking at all of those systems and how all of those systems together have created the disparities that we see that persist every single day within the African American community, particularly around the life disparities. If we look at the fact that African American life expectancy has dropped from 75 years in 2016 to now we are at 70 years. Um, we have lost 5 years of life expectancy in our community. And so that means that those calls to action have to be more than a call to action. They have to be a policy um, put in practice that actually can change the life circumstances of the communities that are disproportionately impacted.
So as you look at the situation, what kinds of things are you seeing being done? I know there's a conference that happens at Cleveland State University every year, and I would imagine that you probably attended at least once or twice. Can you talk about some of the conversations that they have, and perhaps why they may not lead anywhere?
Which conference?
There's a conference that I think I'm trying to think of the brother's name. He's involved in DE&I at Cleveland State University. He might be a vice president on that level, and not brain fog right now. I can't think of the brother's name, but I do know that every year, as a matter of fact, last year on another radio station, I had a conversation with two people who were connected with Cleveland State, and we talked about this conference because there's always great hope that when all these great minds come together, ideas will happen and then implementation will occur. But we haven't seen that thus far. But if you don't know, no worries.
I think if it's a concert that I think is it with Ronnie Dunn?
That's it.
So one of the things that so I wasn't invited to the conference. I was invited as a speaker to talk about the environmental issues, but for the conference as a whole, yeah, I'm not included in the conference. And I think that that's the other thing about Cleveland. We have a lot of silos, and so when you have silos, you don't get anything done. And so that's what we see traditionally in communities that really need the help. It's everybody's working on their own, and so for my community, we've been very deliberate about making sure that we reach out to other organizations and ask them to be a part of the work that we're doing because we cannot do this by ourselves. We cannot change the things that have happened to our communities by only looking out for self. And so for me, it's how do I make sure that my community understands the impact that we can have together? You know, I can raise a whole lot of sand, but it ain't kicking too much too far. But together, if we do actions that are strategic, we can actually change some of the policies. But we have to be willing to make sure that other voices are able to be at the table. And I think for us, sometimes we get caught up in being the only voice, and we think that that's it, and we kind of lose sight of the big picture. And the big picture is, I want my children, my grandchildren, to live a different life and a different existence than I do.
I'm glad you brought up children because that's a perfect segue into bringing our next guest into the conversation. She is Queen Mother ElAnee Barclay Jones, and she is connected with the Family First Child Care Center, Family First Child Care and Empowerment Center down there on Carnegie. Welcome to 360 Info Network, Queen Mother ElAnee.
Very interesting conversation that I was just listening to. Thank you for letting me be a part of this.
Yes. So, Sister Yvonka just brought up children and grandchildren, and
Hmm.
children and grandchildren are very dear to you. And I know that you're also doing something to address the needs of foster children, which
Yes.
are young folks who fall through the cracks. Can you talk about the Family First Child Care and Empowerment Center and what they're doing to address the needs of children?
Okay. And actually, we are a village, and we have 50,000 square feet over there on the corner of 46th and Chest and Carnegie, between Carnegie and Cedar. So, yeah, in that big building, we take care of infants in the daycare center, but we also have an empowerment center there for foster care children. And it's so important that we address that issue because foster care children make up about 50% of the homeless people that you see walking asking for a dollar. You wonder where they come from. Well, after they're 18 years old, then they're emancipated and they're let out. So we have to make sure that they have a foundation. We hire them. We have foster care children working in our center. We train them. We give them skills. We house them. So that's very important that we work with that population, even though all of them, all of our children are important. With the daycare center, those who do have parents and guardians, we work with the parent or guardian with programs that we do with the children. So it's not just us working with the children. We work with the parents and the guardian of the children. We have programs that where we partner with the NBA or the retired football players. Cleo Miller works very closely with us. We had Jim Jones and Emmanuel Leaks working very closely with us. Public Library gave us violins and laptops, and we try to prepare them for the world. But in this preparation, we make sure they know who they are and what they are and why they're here and where they're going. We make sure they know their history. They know the children that were bombed in the church in Alabama. They know Shirley Chisholm. They know people that you don't, a lot of adults don't even know. And they know what happened. They know they do skits. They just did a skit for Black History Month with regards to slavery. And so they're very wise. They're very and we do reward good grades. We have several that get all A's, and we reward them for that. And let's see, what else do we do? We also have, of course, we have radio programs such as this with WOVU. We record our radio programs in our studio, which is within that building, that complex on 46th Street. We record there. We also have a print shop. So we teach the children how to print, how to write, how to think. They use both sides of their brain. It's one thing to get good grades, but it's another thing to be creative. Because if you can think, but you can't create. I mean, God is creative. God made us in His image, so He made us creative beings. And you see a lot of people don't put much energy into the creative side of. And they've taken a lot of that out of the school. So we teach them how to think, how to create books, how to imagine. We do a meditation. We go within. So I try to give them everything that I have gleaned from my several years of existence here on this earth. Try to give that back to them.
Okay. What are the age ranges of your clients?
Well, it just depends on which side of the fence that we're on. So one side is childcare. So they started at 6 weeks old at Family First Childcare, which you can enter it off of 46 and Cedar. At the childcare, they start at 6 weeks old. We even teach them at 6 weeks to well, not at 6 weeks, but at 6 months to draw. They put their hand in applesauce and put it on the paper, and then they've got a picture of their handprint or their footprint. So we so that's one segment of it, and then the other segment is the foster care, which could be any age. They go to the age of 18. So and then with the recording and the printing, we do that for anyone. However, the children that print, they're from 5 years old up.
Okay. If folks are interested in taking advantage of what you offer there, can you give the listening audience information on how they can reach out to you?
Yes. So to call the center itself is 216-202-1511. That's 216-202-1511. And if you want to call me, my number is 216-800-1061. I'll repeat that, 216-800-1061. And I do want to say also another component of what we do. We make sure that people have housing. We make sure that the parents of the children or the caregivers, if they need housing, I've been in real estate since I was 13 years old. My real estate company's over 30 years old, Barclay Jones Realty. So we make sure that they have housing. And that whole idea started back before we even got into childcare. I worked with the Job Corps, and what I would do was the young people, if they had children, I would make sure that they had housing and part of the rent, because they would be renting from from me. So part of their rent was saved for them for when they did want to move. Then I would give them money to either just move or to buy a house. So all that started a long time ago. And that was with Project Unity, which was a program that I started that was a few little ventures that I did were sponsored by the city of Cleveland. And
Okay.
Project Unity stands for Unity, uniting neighbors in touch with their youth.
Okay.
Mhm.
I have on the screen for those who are watching us on Facebook and YouTube, I have a web address. It's familyfirstcle.com. And I'm hopeful that you can go to that website and get those phone numbers. I will capture the phone numbers after I listen back to this recording so that we can post them in the description of this video. And then there won't be any confusion about what the number is. And
Thank
you can
you.
get in touch with Family First. We're going to bring our brother Hamtonio in, who is apparently on the road, on the way to someplace significant, and then we're going to come back and institute our conversation with Yvonka Hall. Brother Hamtonio, how you doing?
Not too bad, not too bad. Like I said, on the road, just listening in. How you doing, Queen Mother?
How are you, Antonio?
I'm doing okay, doing okay. Yeah, it's just on the road, but what you're doing is good. It all starts back to reuniting the community. That sounds like a kind of like a intergenerational type of program you're having because that's what our culture is all about.
Yes,
Uh,
it is, and it's very important that we catch people when they're young. It's hard
mhm.
to take out all of what the world puts in when they're 20 and 30 years old. But if we can catch them as children, so they know how to filter out the lies that they've been telling us. So we've been fed so many lies, so we don't want them to be confused as to what the truth is.
Yeah,
So yeah, so it's very important to catch them when they're young. And I just want to apologize. I For whatever reason, I have to get off the line. But Brother Yeshua, I thank you for allowing me to come. And Brother Antonio, Ivanka Hall, I've heard so, and I kind of keep up with what you do on Facebook. So I applaud you for what you do. And I'm just so happy to be a part of this, but I have to rush and get off because I have to prepare to go somewhere. So if you don't mind, I love you guys.
okay,
All right.
sister.
All right,
Okay.
peace. All right,
Peace
thank
be
you.
with you.
Oh,
All right.
likewise. Mhm.
So, Sister Yvonka, I have to ask you, what were your thoughts about what Queen Mother ElAnee presented in terms of what they're doing at that child care center?
Oh, those things are vitally important. I mean, it's important that we have services for our young people going all the way through, particularly for those who are um, in kinship and foster care. I mean, we have so many families that have been disproportionately impacted um, by the foster care system that
Yeah.
no other community has been hit as hard as ours. And part of that was the war on the African American community that was called the war on drugs, which which now we look at it, when the tables have turned, and it's now, when we look at the opioid crisis and the fentanyl crisis, is this whole thing around family reunification, not taking children away from their families, making sure that they have all of the things they need in order for children to stay in place, and then what happened to our community. And so we know that when there's a will, um, when it's their community, they have an opportunity to change it. But when it's our community, we change it. And so Queen Mother has been instrumental in that change for our communities to make sure that our children are getting the services they need. And we need people like her every single day because of the things that are going on with our young people. We have so many young people that have been abandoned by these systems. These systems were never created to embrace the Blackness of our children. And so for us, it's important for us to teach them about who they are and whose they are. And that's forever important. So we thank
Yeah.
her for her service.
Yes. From your perspective, what are the most, I guess, glaring issues that we're facing as a community environmentally?
Wow. Um, so the most glaring issue that we are facing environmentally is lead poisoning. Lead poisoning is, if you've ever heard the mayor say, public enemy number one, he got it from me. And so lead poisoning is our number one public health crisis that we face now, and it's because of the long-term impact. So lead poisoning doesn't just happen to you as a child; it happens to you across your lifespan. And so we have children who are being diagnosed with ADHD or are being diagnosed with autism, who are have been lead poisoned. We have we're actually working on two studies. One of them is around the correlation between violence and lead. So there is a lead and crime hypothesis that is real. And then the other one is we talk about the number of young African American youth for the first time in history. The suicide rates are high. And so I actually spoke with someone a few weeks ago and asked them to do an analysis of the suicide rates and the number of young people who are lead poisoned. And she went back to the young people who had committed suicide and determined that they did have elevated lead levels. And so that is alarming
Mhm.
because of the cognitive impairment that lead poisoning causes. And so we have to do everything that we can to make sure that the dollars that have been put aside for lead poisoning are actually used to address lead poisoning so that 30 years from now, like what happened in the 1980s, where people thought that they actually addressed lead poisoning and that it was over. And now they hear me talking about lead poisoning. They're like, oh, we got rid of that, 30 years ago. And it's like, no. And so we have to make sure that all the dollars that are being used, are being given, are being used, and that we don't turn around and figure out that the money went to nothing. And so it's important for us to keep our fingers on the pulse of of the administration of any type of dollars that are supposed to be going into our communities to be utilized for the betterment of our communities. And so that is a big health issue. The other thing is around coastal resilience. When we think about what's going on with Lake Erie, um, we actually just got some news, I think the other day, that where they talked about the some of the growths that they had in the algae blooms were a direct result of the Campbell Soup Company dumping into the lake, and that happened in the Dayton area. So we in the Toledo area. So we need to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to make sure that our people understand on a house by house, block by block level, how important our lake is to us, and that everything that you send downstream goes into the water. And so, looking at how we can protect our natural resource, because our water is our most natural and important resource, and we need it to live. And so, we need to make sure that we're doing everything on our end to make sure that we're keeping it as far away from pollution as possible.
I
I
got
know that just like racism being identified as a public health crisis, lead poisoning has also been identified in that way. I'm just wondering, from your perspective, with the work that you've done, have there been any ways to quantify any improvement in the situation?
Well, actually, one of the things that we do know is that in the city of Cleveland, the lead testing rates have dramatically dropped. And in the state of Ohio, less than 45% of children are actually tested for lead. So I have been fighting on a statewide and a federal level in order for us to bring lead testing back into the WIC programs. We took it away from our WIC programs in the state of Ohio, citing dollars, but my analysis is the dollars that we're spending on children that have been poisoned um, is we have a better use of those dollars to make sure that we're stopping it before it happens, that we're doing everything that we can to educate our children, our parents about lead, and that we're doing everything that we can to make sure that we're monitoring children and asking questions of families before children are poisoned in the first place. But we also want to make sure that testing is available, and so part of that thing around testing is to make sure that every avenue that's available to make sure that children are tested is utilized. And so that means in the doctor's office, which hasn't been doing it, to force them to do it, but the WIC programs, to bring it back into the WIC programs, to talk to daycare centers about the possibility of making sure that they're getting children that are in daycare tested, and to make sure that daycares and homes are lead safe. And so that means that they're not lead free, but that means that those areas where children are prone to be exposed to lead are contained, and remediated. And so we want to make sure that that happens to all of our facilities that have contact with our children.
Okay. I know that another component of this issue is landlords and them being responsive to changing the paint in some of their rental properties. Have you seen any progress in the enforcement of those building codes that require lead remediation?
No. And I think part of that is because in the original legislation that we crafted, it had stronger sanctions around landlords. We have lots of landlords that are from out of state here in the city of Cleveland. We actually have landlords who kind of swooped in and purchased whole neighborhoods, um, because they could get them for so cheap. And so when they found out areas that were cheap for them to be able to amass large quantities of land, and large developments for housing, that's what they bought. And so it's not that they're trying to be the best landlords. It's they bought it because it was an economic opportunity for them. And so the families that are renting their housing from them are not receiving the standards that they would give to their families in a home, as far as fixing up and maintaining properties. And so what we have seen, over time is these LLCs are coming in and they're buying up large lots of land and not maintaining them, and nothing has really been done about it. And so this is our opportunity to get it right. And so hopefully, in this next phase that we're going into now around this Lead Safe Cleveland, that we will be more mindful about making sure that we are penalizing these LLCs that are big owners of large amounts of rental property here in the city of Cleveland.
I'd also have to imagine that there might not be enough in terms of building inspectors on the within the structure of the city in Cleveland and other suburbs to do the investigations that they need to identify those properties that have issues, to do the testing and push the needle on that. Would you agree?
Oh, no, it's not that they have to do it. And so what happens is you receive a notice. If you are a landlord, you'll receive a notice that says that you have to have your property inspected so that you can get a certificate. And so what has happened is the certificate program that we've always had, where you had to actually register if you were a landlord in Cleveland, always failed to have the correct number of landlords because a lot of them never even registered. And so now it's saying, okay, well, not only do you have to make sure that you're registered as a landlord, but you also have to make sure that you're getting a lead safe certificate if you are a landlord. And so the landlord will hire an inspector. The inspector will come out, look at the property, determine whether the property needs some assistance. If there's some things around, it's repair, renovate, and paint. And so they'll have an RRP contractor come out and fix those the properties. For properties that have a lot more damage, there's also a way where they can apply for grants. There are grants and things available, and low interest loans that are available. And you would have to talk to the people who run those programs to find out all of that, because that's not what I do. What I do is fight to make sure that the things are happening. And then and so it has nothing to do with the building and housing inspection. It has everything to do with following what happens with your mail. So when your mail comes and it says it is time for your house to be inspected, then you follow through on that. And so we want to make sure that there's not a bottleneck that's preventing people from being able to follow through.
Okay. If you're just joining us, you're listening to 360 Info Network right here on AM 1490 WERE. Our guest is Yvonka Hall. She is the executive director of the Northeast Ohio Black Health Coalition, and we've been having a conversation about the impact of lead poisoning on our community and some of the issues that are connected to that. Also, want to remind you that you can check out this broadcast on Facebook and YouTube. If you go to our YouTube channels, do us a big favor, like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps us out significantly. I want to bring Brother Antonio back into the conversation. Anything that you want to mention or reiterate as we continue our broadcast?
Yeah, a couple things. Um, it just, I want to bring another layer to this thing. When we talk about the landlords, we talk about the lead banks, paint, and the kids. I took a couple classes in reference to it, and just to put a little twist to the thing, because it seemed like all too much is all about dollars and cents when it comes to the safety of the kids and our community. We got to get back to the people who's actually manufacturing these paints as well. Um, and I found it actually disturbing to find out that some places over a century ago knew about the harmful effects of lead in paint. And up until, if I'm not mistaken, Yvonne maybe can correct me, I want to say in the 70s or something, when we first started really paying any close attention to the lead that's in the paints that's going into the houses. So it just seemed like there's a long string of neglect that took place early on that could have circumvented a lot of the issues that we are having right now. And even to today, that people should know that these particular companies are still making lead-based paint, and they're shipping it to other parts of the world. Even today, places in Africa and stuff like that is still getting lead paint with lead in it. So if we talking about now the harmful effects of lead, and we talk about, yeah, she's perfectly correct. I remember reading some stuff about anger, causing all kind of emotional issues with kids, how lead affects kids. So, and they talked and they linked it to the temperament of the kids as far as being angry and stuff like that. So the question is, why it took so long, and why are we still those companies, those big companies that make paint, still making lead and shipping it to different parts of the world?
Sister Yvonka, you mentioned something to me the other day about lead paint and anger. Could you elaborate on that issue?
So can I elaborate about the whole thing around this lead and processing? So
Please
when I
do.
was a little girl, I remember going to my great grandmother's house, and my great grandmother had the most beautiful, pristine white walls you ever wanted to see in your life. I mean, they were beautiful. We would paint the house twice a year, during Easter and during Christmas. So every Easter, every Christmas, without fail, our house smelled like paint. Remember how paint used to smell when we were growing up? Yeah, that's what it smelled like. Um, and I realized that the reason that her walls look like that is because that's what lead does. Lead causes your paint to have this shiny effect,
Hmm.
right? And so Sherwin-Williams was one of the main manufacturers of paint with lead. Sherwin-Williams still makes paint with lead under the Dutch Boy brand. The Dutch Boy brand is still sold internationally. And a lot of the canned products that we buy, the soda pops and things like that, the reason that that red is so vibrant and that blue is so vibrant on those cans is because it's lead in it. The other thing is that if you have clay pots, or if people are in cultures that are cooking with clay pots, those clay pots have lead in it. So it's more likely that if you're buying things from like the dollar store, or you're buying candy from the dollar store that's coming from overseas, it's made in a place that is processed that has lead. The other thing is that if you are a smoker, which you should not be, or if you smoke marijuana, marijuana and nicotine are there's lead in the growing and in the process. So there's lead in cigarettes, um, and so we have lead in all of these different areas. The reason why Sherwin Williams is not held culpable for what has happened to the community is because in the 90s, I want to say it was the early 90s. Um, there was a time during an election cycle where Richard Cordray became our attorney general just for a short time because there was some corruption on the other side. So during that time, what happened was because of the contributions around money, um, we had filed a lawsuit against Sherwin Williams. So the state of Ohio had filed a lawsuit, and California filed a lawsuit against Sharon Williams to make them culpable for what was happening in our communities. Well, Ohio's lawsuit was dropped, and Sharon Williams was not held culpable and could not be held culpable and could not be sued as a direct result of what happened after that. California's lawsuit went through. California's lawsuit actually was finished processing probably about 2 years ago. And Sherwin Williams was forced to pay California like $436 million for what happened there. But they also got like a $400,000 tax break here on our side. And so they can't be held culpable here in Ohio for what has happened to our kids. And so if you want to know what happened about that, that is what happened in the state of Ohio. The other thing is that lead causes irrational thinking. So when you're little, it's in your blood. But as you start aging, lead mimics calcium, so it makes your body think that you're getting calcium in your bones when your bones aren't actually getting what they need. And so what happens is as you're getting older, it goes from your blood to your bones, and then it goes into the soft tissue, into your other organs. And so as we age, what we see is people are more likely to have hypertension, they have diabetes, they have dementia, they have kidney failure, are all directly related to being poisoned as children or being poisoned as adults, because you can still um, absorb lead in your body throughout your life. It just doesn't affect your brain like it does when you're a child. And so that's the important part for us to know, is that when we have people, other communities come in to tell us, well, the reason that African Americans have hypertension issues is because your diet. Well, they're eating the same stuff that we're eating. It has nothing to do with your diet. It has everything to do with your environment, the things that you have been able to breathe in throughout the course of your life. And so that's important for us to understand, is that at the end of life, lead impacts your heart, diabetes, um, dementia, and your kidneys are all things that are impacted by lead poisoning. And severe lead poisoning can cause death. And we've had lots of people die young as a direct result of multi organ failure because of lead poisoning.
Yeah. Well, I would probably disagree to a certain extent. I think that things work together. I think diet and environment, because we talk about food, and there are indicators that there are certain things in food that cause behavioral issues with children too. So perhaps it's the lead on top of the additives and the food colorings and the preservatives and so forth that contribute to that young person's mental state. I would
And some of
also
those
think
foods also
that,
have lead in them too. So I mean,
yeah,
look
that
at the whole thing around cinnamon and applesauce. People
yeah.
have been feeding their kids applesauce with cinnamon for years.
Hmm.
It's not that the applesauce has lead in it, it's the cinnamon. The cinnamon is being processed in a plant that has lead in it. And so there is lead in the processing of cinnamon.
Right.
But we get a lot of our spices from not here, and they come very cheaply. And cheap spices we get what we paid for. And so, because those are the things that are available in our community. And so, um, we know the role of diet, but we also understand that even when we eat healthy in our communities, the environments that we live in have not changed. So no matter how healthy you're eating, if you're still bringing in all those toxins, taking in all of those things every single day, um, then you still are going to have an adverse outcome. So yeah.
Yeah. All right. We're winding down on the radio broadcast. So I just wanted to make sure that I gave people an opportunity to find out what they need to know if they want to reach out to the Northeast Ohio Black Health Coalition. And you can go to neoblackhealthcoalition.org, neoblackhealthcoalition.org, if you're interested in becoming someone who can make an impact as Sister Yvonka is. I want to talk a bit more about the food situation that we have in Cleveland. And I know when we had the conversation the other day, you mentioned that you were in a position to distribute food in Cuyahoga County, largely as a result of what was going on with the pandemic. But that's a whole nother subject that really needs to be explored, because when you look around and you see folks who are suffering, we're at the top of the list.
Mhm.
And there are things that we can do to ameliorate the suffering, but we have to be educated. We have to change our mindset about a lot of things in order to make the adjustments that can result in the improvement of our health. And in order for us to be effective citizens, we have to be healthy. If you can't think straight because of the things that you're ingesting, and then on top of everything else, we've got radiation that emanates from devices in our homes. We've got all these things going on at the same time. Seems like there's the perfect storm for dysfunction, and nothing about that will change unless we decide to address it. Brother Hamtonio, we got just a few moments before we conclude the radio broadcast. Anything you want to share with the audience before we move forward?
Just quickly that we have to be more involved in, like you say, our environment and things around us. We just uh, fell into this place of normalcy, cancer, dementia, all the rest of it, and we're not screaming as a community that what's going on around us. We seeing this, we dropping off like crazy, and we should be more in tune.
All right. I am going to take this time to thank our engineer, Tone Harley. He is the reason that we're able to do what we do in terms of being on live on Facebook and YouTube and on the radio at the same time. We are indeed indebted to him and grateful to what he does. And we're also grateful to you, the listener, who tune in Saturdays at 11 to hear 360 Info Network. It is a labor of love for us, and we do it because we know that it's the right thing to do. So those of you who are listening to us on AM radio, thanks for joining us. As always, know yourself, love yourself, be yourself, and make today your absolute best day. Peace.
Peace.
All right. Just a few more moments with Yvonka, because I know she's triple booked, as we said at the beginning of the broadcast. I don't know how she does it. People think I'm busy, but I'm actually in my house sometimes for days at a time. But Sister Yvonka, I know she's out every day, every day. It's a labor of love, but somebody's got to do it, and we're glad that she is willing to serve in that capacity. We've talked about lead poisoning as one of the major issues. Are there any other issues that you want to shine a light on today?
Oh, definitely. The food, you talked about food insecurity, and these people want to call them food deserts, but it's food apartheid that happens in our community. And I think the disinvestment around our educational systems, that we have to do everything that we can to make sure that this whole thing around educational funding changes, so that we can bring some equity to the process of making sure that our children have quality buildings, quality teachers, quality books, have computers. They have all the things they need for learning. And I think the other thing is we have to make sure that we're pushing for healthcare for all, that people should not have to pay for healthcare, and that we should be able to receive the services that we need without being discriminated against. And so looking at this anti-racism and healthcare settings is important to our work also. And, these healthy meal options, making sure that if our neighborhoods are going to be inundated with fast food establishments, that we also have healthy food options in those establishments, particularly for our young people. And that if that means making sure that they have a side salad with a Happy Meal, then we need to be having a side salad with a Happy Meal. So looking at all of those things and how they, impact the community, and looking at how we can bring about change.
Yeah. We talk about food also, there's the idea of education because, when you say you eat healthy, well, that could mean anything. There's so many different kinds of diets, there's so many different choices that you can make in eating. And then there are the things that are kind of unique to us in terms of our physical composition. For instance, 90% or more of African Americans are lactose intolerant, but we eat cheese and we drink milk and we do all these dairy products. And then we go to the doctor and the doctor will write us a prescription, or we'll go to the drugstore and we'll get something that's anti-gas or whatever. We have to educate ourselves and know our bodies to know what works and doesn't work. Vegan diet isn't for everyone. Some of us are okay with it. Some of us, we just don't want to let go of the things that we've eaten for all our lives. But we also have to be mindful. And I think I really appreciate what you said about metals in some of the things that we eat, because, the cheaper it is, probably the worse it is for you. When you look at that label and it has a whole bunch of ingredients on it, all those things are in it to stretch whatever that product is so that they can sell more of it and make more money. To make bread, basically, you need water, flour, and yeast. But when you look at that Home Pride, it's got a lot of unpronounceable words on it. And, you have to decipher what that is and know what it does to you. We'll go to the store and, they'll have the generic brand of spices on there, and those spices are irradiated. And as you pointed out, there might be the presence of lead or some other metal in that spice, which means that it's a toxin that gets stored in your liver, and it takes its toll on your body over a period of time. So, um, thinking about education, I just wonder what kinds of things that we can do to inform our community so that they can make better choices, and what happened with the East Side Market doesn't happen again. And I'm sharing this experience just to shine the light on it. I live in Glenville. I live literally right around the corner from the East Side Market. And when it was announced that it was going to be reopening, I thought, okay, great. Now we have an opportunity to get some quality food. So I went there with the councilman and I talked to the produce manager, and he talked to me about having organic produce at the East Side Market. So when they opened, they didn't have a lot, but they had some organic produce. But the issue with it was that A, it was too expensive, and B, many people weren't willing to purchase it. So as a result,
Mhm.
there's literally no organic produce at the East Side Market. So if I want organic, I have to drive all the way to University Heights to go to Whole Foods, or drive all the way out to Mayfield Village or Mayfield Heights to get to Fresh Time. Or I can go to Aldi, which has some organic, but they don't have the same volume of organic choices there. The reason that people didn't buy organic produce is because, one, they didn't recognize the value, and two, the price was out of reach. So I'm just wondering, what can we do to educate our people so that they know that they can make better choices?
I think that it just goes back to the whole thing around food as medicine, you know, helping people to understand that correlation. Like, if you help change the things that are going on in your diet, then you may not have to take that blood pressure medicine, or you may not have to take the medicines for diabetes. Like, um, the things that are going on with your diet are everything. And so, being cognizant of those things, and being talking to your community about it. Like, I haven't eaten pork or beef, I know, in 30, I think it's about 35 years. And I stopped eating fish probably actually 11 years ago. And that's because all of a sudden, I developed an allergy. I went to eat some fish one day and I broke out in hives, throat closed. I'm like, what the heck is going on? Um, and I was like, okay, it's what's going on with the water? What's going on with the habitat that the fish are in, and where that all of a sudden were things that I have been eating my whole life, I couldn't eat anymore. And so I think that it's, educating people starting off very young about food choices, and about, um, some of the other choices, and then looking at like the labels, reading the labels about the seasonings that we're choosing for our food, and making sure. Like, I found out early on that I couldn't have anything that had MSG in it, monosodium glutamate, that it causes me to have severe headaches. Um, and that it causes cancer in lab mice. And so, looking at those things that are found in my community that have monosodium glutamate in them, barbecue potato chips, Doritos, Fritos, those hot Cheetos, like all of those things have MSG in them. And so, looking for natural brands, and so I like the Ruffles Simply, because you look at the amount of ingredients that are on there, and you look at the other things, and you do see this long list. So yeah, just being able to choose a little bit more wisely, um, and then buying, instead of canned beans, buying fresh beans and cooking them. You know, but I think that that takes time in order to get people used to being able to cook things. We have to go back to basics. The basics worked.
Yeah, it's amazing too that some of the things that our grandparents did and our grandparents did, they were effective. You remember how grandmother would send you out to the woods and say, "Get this, get that, bring it back to me," and then they would make a tea or a poultice or something like that. That was because we had a greater awareness of ourselves. But we can go through 13 years of school and not know the difference between the colon and the spleen, the liver and the kidney. I was watching a video just yesterday, and it was talking about ways that or herbs that you could use to support your liver, your kidney, and one other organ. And so, again, if you have this awareness, you can use those things to remove the toxins that have been stored in your body. But if you don't, you just keep doing the same thing. We are at the end of the spring equinox. And what I do typically during the spring equinox and the autumn equinox is I do a raw fast.
Mhm.
So I'm not eating cooked foods. I'm not eating processed foods. I'm just basically eating something that I got from Dr. James Brown. And I got to tell you, Dr. Brown changed my life. He's a retired gastroenterologist. So he is an allopathic doctor, but he's also a holistic practitioner. So what he was suggesting is that during those two periods, you eat foods that have hot components in them. They have sulfur content, which has a beneficial impact on your body. So, and I'm gonna tell you, it's not the best tasting salad that you can eat, but I eat mustard greens, dandelion greens, red onions, garlic, peppers, all hot stuff. And then I'll make a dressing with olive oil and balsamic vinegar, and that helps it to be a little bit more palatable. But I can tell you over the 4 days, I can notice an energy increase. And I also drop a little bit of weight because I haven't been eating as much as I have before. It's extremely beneficial. And then during the solstices, you do a fast that includes oranges, water, and cayenne pepper.
Mhm.
And so, many people are not aware of the benefits of fasting, but you can actually eat all the stuff that you want to eat. It's just a matter of the timing of what you eat and when you don't eat. And when you fast, your body goes into a reparative mode. So some of the things that are wrong can be corrected by fasting because you're giving the body a chance to rest. Digestion, it uses a lot of energy. And so when your body doesn't have to expend that energy in digestion, it can do other things that will benefit you. So there's some merit to it. There are some folks that actually just eat one meal a day. Can you imagine that?
Well, because you really don't need. I mean, because that your body is running off of that energy. Um, but you meet other people who they eat too much. If you're eating your 3 meals or you're eating large meals, like you actually look at some people's meals and they can actually split them in half, because of how much food content they have on a plate. Because the whole thing is we need to fill up the whole plate, and it's like, well, you don't need to fill up the whole plate. You can have a small saucer and have enough of the things that you want on there, to fill you up. And so, and I think it just goes back to communities that don't have a lot. When you don't have a lot, sometimes when you are able to get it, you get as much as you can. Um, but that doesn't mean that it's the right thing to do. And so, getting people to change their mindsets around, what do they consider healthy eating? What are you eating for breakfast? What are you eating for lunch? What are you eating for dinner? Or if you are fasting, making sure that you're doing it properly, because there's a proper way to fast and there, is an improper way. And some people that are doing it don't do it the right way.
Yes. I just want to give you an opportunity to talk about some of the initiatives that you have in progress and what you're working on now. Can you give us some insight on what the Northeast Ohio Black Health Coalition is doing at the moment?
Sure. We so today we're hosting a couple of events. One of them is a community engagement training. We do those quite often. But we actually partner with our other partners that come from across the country, which is A2 and Acorn. So they actually come in and do a community engagement. We do some things with CASE around clinical trials, making sure that we understand the benefit of clinical trials, like the one today is around people who are caring for kinship family members. So it's a way to determine that if you are caring for kinship, do you have elevated cholesterol levels? Do you have an elevated blood pressure? Is it directly related to the fact that you're spending a lot of your time caring for someone else and that you may not be eating right or drinking enough water or doing those other things? And so that's one of the studies we're doing today. We also have a number of programs. So we have WELL, which is Women Experiencing Love, Life, and Laughter, which happens in May. This year it'll be May 4th. We have um, Eggs, Pains, and Automobiles, which in June is a program that we use to talk to men around health and wellness. They are able to get free health screenings. We partner with Carolina's Health Center on in August. We do a conference every year. This year it's the state of reparations in the African American community. So it'll actually be online, and we have, I think, about 10 speakers that'll be speaking through the course, 10 to 12 speakers through the course of this 7-hour conference. We do African American Women's Wellness Walk every September. And then in October, we recognize Domestic Violence Month, looking at No More Tears When Your Sweetie Ain't So Sweet. And so those types of the things that we do. And then in November, there is a week that is Lead Poisoning Awareness Prevention Week, Lead Poisoning Prevention Week, which we actually partner with the Environmental Protection Agency and our friends at Clash to make sure that our community understands the gravity of lead poisoning and what we can do to help change the conditions in our children. And so for us, we're out here every day, every month. We have usually every month we have something scheduled, and when we don't have something scheduled, we're getting prepared for the next thing. And so this is like my team is waiting for me now, but this is a great time for us to make sure that we're reaching the community and getting them the things they need.
I'm so glad that you brought up that idea of self-care, because so many people who provide for others don't take the time to provide for themselves, and they could be more effective if they took care of themselves first. You hear the adage over and over and over again about riding on the airplane, and when the oxygen mask drops down, you got to put it on yourself before you can help someone else. But self-care is so important, and I think that the stigma around mental health counseling, so to speak, is kind of diminishing. People see it, they hear about folks who are going through it, they see the changes that happen in folks that undergo counseling and the improvement in their lives. So it doesn't necessarily have the stigma that it had before, but it still exists. But then there are things that we can do for ourselves that enable us to take care of ourselves, like you think about meditation, you think about exercise, you think about eating the proper food, you think about just taking a time out.
Taking a drive, taking a walk.
Right.
For me, it's, because I have a car, I'm able to get in the car, turn on my music, listen to cruising music, um, and just enjoy the sun beaming on me, particularly when we have those times of year when we don't have a lot of sun here. Um, Getting an opportunity to fly out a lot. I get a chance to travel. And that is important to me, being able to go to the ocean and just sit there and look out at God and His greatness. And so for me, that is my wellness time, my time that I put myself back in check to get myself ready for the fight that's ahead of me, because I spend a lot of my large part of my time advocating for my community. And so I don't know if my community understands how hard it is for me to be many times the only person in the room talking about the things around my community, or to hear from other communities that's not my community that things that we want to do in our community or that I want to do are being blocked from others that look like me in my community. Um, and so for me, that I take the shots for the team a lot. And so because of that, I have to decompress. And so my decompression is to go to where, the thing that replenishes me. I've gone to Africa, I've been in Hawaii, I've gone to San Juan, I've been to Alaska. I go to places where I can look out and look at the wonders of God.
Yes, amazing. And we're so grateful that you take this fight because somebody's got to get that seat at the table. You know, there was a very famous person who said, power concedes nothing without demand. So
For
if you expect change, you have to speak up for yourself. If you don't, you can expect to get what you've always been getting. I'm gonna let you go because I know you got all these responsibilities. But there's one thing that I got to bring up. You mentioned the state of reparations conference. Tell us
Yeah.
more about that.
So the State of Reparations Conference, I can't remember what, I think it's either August the 7th or the 8th, whatever is that Friday. So it'll be all day. Um, Dr. Zachary Williams, who is our policy director, is handling that. I have four full-time staff that work for me. And so we have a number of speakers that will be coming from across the country. They'll be zooming in and talking about education, employment, housing, and health, and the reparations pieces around all of those things, all of those systems. I think it's important for us to talk about reparations and for us to continue that conversation because I think that, that should be one of the things that we bring up politically because the African American community has yet to be compensated for the trauma that we have continued to face um, here in America. And the fact is that every single inch of this was built by our ancestors, and that whether we're talking about our school systems or whether our healthcare systems, those buildings were built by us. And so these systems that we can't even um, enter into and receive equity as part of. And so for us, the reparations isn't necessarily all about money, but it is about making sure that we're looking out for our ancestors, so our future ancestors, because one day I'm going to be an ancestor. And so I want to make sure that whatever policy pieces that we're putting together now are benefiting our children, our grandchildren, our great grandchildren, our great great grandchildren. We want to make sure that we're not just putting something in and they're saying, oh, well, we're willing to give you $5,000. No, you're not going to give me $5,000. You're going to give me 5,000 years of benefits to make sure that my community is able to be uplifted during this time. And I think that that's important for us that we, um, you know, the slave owners were benefited um, during emancipation. They received monies for our emancipation. And we don't talk about that, but we didn't receive any dollars. We were left to die. And if it wasn't for the Freedmen's Bureau, the establishment of the Freedmen's Bureau, which brought with us health care, we would have died. We would have went into obscurity. And so because we live, we have faced all of the issues around continuing to be in bondage in our own communities. And so for us, it's due time for a conversation and for policies to be put in place that help to get reparations for our communities.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Ivanka. I think that they conveniently resurrect that issue around election time. And then after the election, they put it back to sleep. They put it back on the table, and they're not really willing to give any serious consideration to it. But as you indicated, plantation owners got reparations, and we didn't. As a matter of fact, they promised us 40 acres and a mule, and they reneged on that promise as well. And here we are, hundreds of years later in the same situation. We have this idea that we're making all this progress because some of us are able to become billionaires, but you got just a few billionaires and you got a lot of folks who are seeing their money diminish in value because of inflation. I have often thought that money printing is not an issue because the United States has given itself permission to create as much money as they want to create. That's what economic stimulus is all about. So it's not that they can't create the money, it's that are they willing to do what's right for this population? And it's clear at this point that they're not. Who knows, maybe that will change, but I think it also was important to have those conversations. So I look forward to the state of reparations cons, the gathering that you have, and perhaps there will be a space for me to promote it so that people have an awareness of it, and then maybe we can generate some attendance so that folks can walk away more informed and empowered to speak to authority as you are. Yvonka Hall, I want to thank you so much for joining me on 360 Info Network today. I hope this is the beginning of a fruitful dialogue that will result in illumination in this community and change, because change is what we seek. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right.
Bye-bye.
And to those of you who are watching us, thanks for joining us as well. Don't forget, like, comment, and subscribe to this channel, and you'll get notifications about future broadcasts. Peace.